It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and of course, as always, that means some smart talk radio is in your future, and this segment should be a fascinating one indeed. We are very pleased to have Karsten von Hoesslin with us. Who is Karsten von Hoesslin? He is a tactical medic. He's trained in special weapons and tactics, in behavioral profiling, interviewing, and interrogation. He's also, as well as a crime scene investigator in technical rescue operations. He's also an instructor in major incident management, disaster preparedness, and hostile environment training, amongst many other things. We're going to talk specifically about a fascinating series on the National Geographic Channel called Lawless Oceans. Should be a good one. Karsten, how are you, my friend?
Well, I'm very well. Thank you for having me on board.
Well, we're very pleased to have you here. Let's, again, for those that do not know of work by you previously, tell us a little bit about your background and why what happens out on the high seas is of particular interest to you.
Well, I've been working mostly in undercover and in special intelligence operations out at sea for about a decade now. And for example, my PhD methodology, it really looked at human intelligence gathering tactics and how do you flip and how do you handle assets. And so that became very practical in this case and in the series of Lawless Oceans, where it comes down to trying to get more intelligence from the human level, and how do you get to deckhands and witnesses, and how do you flip them? And so that's a bit about my background and how it then applies to the series Lawless Oceans, which effectively is a murder investigation that all stemmed from a grainy 10-minute YouTube video with really no evidence in terms of who, where, when, how, and why.
What is it when, by the very title, Lawless Oceans, it suggests intrigue and adventure out there? How lawless are the oceans on this planet? What, again, over a decade, you've seen quite a bit. What really, is it lawless out there, or is it just incidents or twos that you just happen to find?
Well, I mean, if we think about North America and we see relatively advanced and militarized coast guards, that model wouldn't apply to almost anywhere else in the world, really, especially the Indian Ocean and the South Pacific. And the problem is that anything outside of 12 nautical miles, which is a state's territorial waters, is really fair game. And they do have the exclusive economic zone where you can police relatively well up to 200, but out there in the middle of the ocean, you could literally, I mean, as this video has proven, because it remained up to this point unsolved, you could literally get away with murder.
So I have a question for you, because explain a little bit maybe about international law here. If someone is murdered in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in a fight at sea, maybe between two ships that meet one another, who is charged, or who is responsible, or who is the prosecutor, so to speak? Who becomes the defendant? How is that handled?
Well, it is a complex issue, and I mean, you do have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the UNCLOS, which hopefully states, and at least in modern times, most states have signed on to it, they're a party to it, and they've ratified it, which means that they have domestic law to enforce those articles within that convention. The other issue is that the flag of the ship that you're on. So in our investigation here, you've got Taiwanese and Seychelles flagged ships. Now, technically, if I'm on that ship and I'm committing murder, it's the same as committing murder on land in Taiwan or in the Seychelles, and that's where jurisdiction applies. But what makes this particular investigation so difficult is that in both these cases, the local authorities, the agencies, are not taking on this case. It's almost as if they prefer that this just be swept under the carpet.
Is there a particular reason why these crimes do happen at sea? Maybe it seems obvious, but or are these murders, for example, the one you were referring to, could this just as easily, in this situation, happen on dry land?
I suppose, but the key issue is out there at sea is there's so many motives and there's so many things that can fuel the ability to commit murder. And that's one of the interesting points about the series Lawless Oceans, because it's a 6-episode series. And as each episode carries on, we get one step closer to solving the mystery, because it's not just a crime, it's also a mystery because we didn't know anything in the first place. But also each episode explores a new underworld of maritime crime. If it's illegal migration, if it's drug trafficking, if it's piracy, if it's illegal fishing or slave fishing, each episode delves into that underworld, so to speak. And the irony is that in all of them, there's enough reason, enough motive to commit murder.
Karsten, you mentioned piracy. I'd like to explore that with you. Tell us a little bit about, are there still, I mean, we've heard of them in years past, but are there real live pirates, so to speak, or modern day pirates? And are out there, where are they most prevalent if they are out there? And where do they come from?
A good friend of mine, he says, he's a pirate expert as well, and he says, you know, a pirate never dies, they just sleep. So even in times when you have a decline in piracy, like you would off the coast of Somalia right now, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It doesn't mean that it's over. It just means that they're effectively sleeping. And that means that the business model of piracy, whether it's in the Horn of Africa or whether it's in Southeast Asia or in West Africa, that model will always exist. The infrastructure is there. It just may be certain indicators or measures that will stop piracy for the time being. Off the Horn of Africa, where this murder investigation does take place, you've got armed guards, you've got naval forces that are patrolling the waters, and that will reduce piracy. But when they go, piracy will be back immediately. And one of the biggest problems that we also address is illegal fishing, and they're connected, is that the worse that illegal fishing gets, as we see off the coast of Somalia, that's almost like a brewing factor for piracy to emerge in some of these anarchic waters.
We just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis, from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. In this segment, interesting conversation with Karsten von Hoesslin. He is he's a special investigator and has spent over a decade investigating crimes of all kinds of various natures on the high seas. He's also trained as a SWAT member and much, much more. Let's go back a little bit and talk about, if we stay on piracy or stay on Lawless Oceans, and that's really the topic here. Again, it's a fascinating series that's airing on the National Geographic Channel, in which he hosts and serves as special investigator. What is the role, in your opinion, or in reality, of what are governments of various countries doing to patrol the high seas? Are they effective? And if they're not, why not?
Well, if we take the Horn of Africa as an example, that was a big learning process, especially for international navies or Western navies, and not just Western navies, the Russian Navy, the Chinese Navy. They all jumped into the region to effectively secure the waterways, the sea lanes of communication. And as much as the challenge that was, it was a steep learning curve, but they have control of that area. The problem is the Indian Ocean is extremely vast and it's massive. And just because warships are patrolling the Gulf of Aden or the Somali Basin, you still have insecurity issues further out in the Indian Ocean. And if piracy or drugs are, let's say drug smuggling, are the two things that the navies are trying to combat, illegal fishing, for example, isn't touched and it's not regulated. And again, if that brews into piracy down the road, that's a severe problem. So Western governments are doing a fair amount, and they're actively patrolling. The Americans, they have the Coalition Task Force, the CTF, and that's making a huge difference. But you know, coastal states, lesser developed states, they face severe problems in not only policing their 200 nautical miles, but even their territorial waters, which is just 12 miles out.
What about, again, we're talking about piracy, we talk about drugs, we talk about murder, we talk about shipping all kinds of illegal or stolen goods. Is there some kind of international maritime honor amongst thieves out there? Do they know one another? Is there a connection of any kind? Do they leave each other alone? Oh, you're out to murder somebody, I don't care about that. Or you're transferring drugs of some kind. Is there that honor amongst thieves, or is there a code out there that they adhere to?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I wish I could say yes, but I think the honest answer is no. Even in this particular investigation, there are a lot of questions raised about the actual victims, the people that are executed in the water, and are they perfectly innocent? Could they have been smuggling drugs, or could they have been fishing illegally as well? And well, if the answer is yes, then that means that there is no honor amongst thieves. It means that there is competition. There are turf wars out there, whether it's over drug trafficking routes, whether it's over fishing grounds, whether it's over who can pirate ships in certain areas, which clan or which syndicate is behind it. So the straight answer is no, I don't think there's any honor amongst thieves.
What have you found so far to be the most dangerous in this series?
Well, those of you that are watching the series, and tonight we'll be airing episode 6, which is the final episode, there's going to be, in terms of the rate of resolution, this investigation is extremely complex. It's been something that's for me been the most dynamic and most challenging that I've ever faced. And it will continue, and the investigation will be ongoing. Tonight will serve a relatively big curveball in terms of the criminal underworld, and also explaining why agencies may not be investigating this case, especially in Taiwan, which is where these ships are flagged and where this should be investigated. In terms of danger, it's corruption for me that scares me the most, whether it's on the series or whether it's the past 10 years. I can always trust a thief or a pirate. At least they're good on their word for the most part in terms of honor to me. But corrupt agencies, that's always the scariest thing.
Well, as we start to wind down here again, what sort of a logical follow-up? Share with our Lewis at Large listeners, if you would, what's going to happen once this particular series is over?
Well, the case will be ongoing, and in that sense, the series is very much focused, and that's because of the time span. It's because of the complexity of the series. It's very much focused on one key, perhaps the key suspect, but there are others still at large. And the problem for me is that having started this, the ball is rolling. There's inertia. I can't stop now just because, let's say, episode 6 comes around. So I'm in the field right now, actually. I'm tracking one of the key suspects in this murder investigation as we speak, and this will not be over. And I have to keep going until justice is served, or at least everyone is held accountable, and that an agency picks this up. But what's really terrifying is that there's also more incidents, there's more cases while investigating this case, discovering more shootings, more murders, and I cannot help but feel compelled to try and look into them and try and solve them as well.
Well, it sounds like sequels are certainly in order. I certainly hope that would happen. This is a tremendous series. Again, a National Geographic Channel, Lawless Oceans. Karsten von Hoesslin, who is an extraordinary investigator. I know it sort of obsesses you 24/7. I can't imagine you ever really taking your eye off the ball here. Would love to have you on again. And any way our listeners can find out more about the work you do, website, anything like that?
Absolutely. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter as well as Instagram. I'll be doing regular tweets and updates on the investigation and on the case. And even after tonight's final episode, I'll still be going on tweeting and ensuring that the investigation continues. And so far, I've been really grateful because there's been so much public support and so many people are so optimistic about this and wanting to get this solved. My Twitter is Kars V Hoesslin, Kars V for Victor Hoesslin, and it's under my name, Karsten von Hoesslin.
Well, again, appreciate your time, appreciate the energy and the work that you're doing, and best of luck, and would love to have you on again.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me on board.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.